When I was 18 years old, I found myself pregnant. I never viewed the baby as a human. I viewed the baby just as a problem. Just thought that, the sooner I get rid of the problem, the better, and the easier it will be to go on with my life. When I found out I was pregnant, I was about 8 weeks pregnant. I planned to go to Tulsa to get an abortion. My best friend from high school drove up. I had an address, I had an appointment, and we headed out. And whatever address we went to the wrong address. There was no abortion clinic. So we had to find a payphone and call the clinic to say, hey, where are you? As it turned out, they were on the opposite side of town. There was no way that we could get there in my allotted appointment time. So it was a case of, sorry, you're gonna have to reschedule and come back. I went back to Fayetteville, Arkansas, dejected, upset, and rescheduled for the following week. My same best friend came and drove me to Tulsa, and we did go to the correct clinic. They did abortions to 12 weeks in Oklahoma at the time. And at the time, I should have been about 10 weeks pregnant. When they did the ultrasound, I was over 12 weeks. So they turned me down. They wouldn't do the abortion. Defeated once again. So I went back to Fayetteville. I knew that I could get an abortion in Little Rock up to 15 weeks. So I made an appointment. Another friend from high school was going to drive me. My boyfriend at the time, William, agreed to drive me to where she lived. For some unexplained reason, the night that he was driving me, it was so foggy that we couldn't even see the lines on the road. Of course, I was so determined to have an abortion. It finally reached the point where we couldn't continue. It wasn't safe. And so we went back to Fayetteville, and my friend agreed to pick me up the next morning and then drive to Little Rock. First thing they did was an ultrasound. I measured 15.3 weeks. Defeated again. We had no choice, but to turn around and go back. Mission not accomplished. It just seemed so obvious that something larger than myself was controlling what was happening. The clinic in Little Rock told me that I could go to Dallas, Texas, and that they did abortions to 20 weeks. I went to 2 clinics in Dallas. The first one, they did abortions to 20 weeks. They did an ultrasound. I measured 21.6 weeks. The numbers did not align with how pregnant I was. I had a meltdown in the clinic. They gave me another address and sent me to a second clinic that did abortions to 22 weeks. I knew that if I left there and went to the next clinic, it wouldn't happen. And so I confirmed, can I take this ultrasound with me? Will they accept this? Because if there's another ultrasound done, I'm out of luck, like always. They called, they set it up, they said they would accept that ultrasound. So we headed to the second clinic. Instead of doing an ultrasound, they basically started the procedure. They inserted the laminaria, and my friend and I went back to her sister's house. I had been so determined to have the abortion that I never considered the humanity of it, or the loss of it, or the reality of what was happening. I was just hell-bent on eliminating the problem. At the same time, William wouldn't leave me alone that night. He was calling constantly, trying to talk me out of having the abortion. I was hurting and scared. Around midnight, I finally told him, if you'll come to Dallas and be with me, then I'm 95% sure I won't have the abortion. He got up at 4 a.m. and drove to Dallas to meet me at the clinic. So when I got off the elevator, he was standing there. And he went with me into the doctor's office, and I told him that I had changed my mind. And he told me that there was a very good chance that at this point I would miscarry anyway. I made the decision to put the baby up for adoption. On July 26, 1982, very early in the morning, I woke up in the middle of the night and everything was wrong. Bill and Jana, the couple that I was living with, I went into their bedroom and woke Jana up and told her that something's not right. And so she told me that we needed to go to the hospital. She was born at 8:23 in the morning. She was 13 weeks premature. One of the nurses asked if I'd like to see her. I said yes. And when I saw her, I knew I couldn't give her up. But at the same time, I didn't have a plan. Bill and Jana were a young married couple at the time with 2 small children. Bill and Jana saw a need. They gave themselves. They gave their home. They made their lives uncertain because of me, a stranger. They were the no judgment zone. No. William and I did end up getting married, and we have 2 other children, and we put the abortion capers in a box and set it high on the shelf. And it wasn't something we talked about. Lauren came home from college. We had never told her any of this. I can only explain it as it's one of the few times in my life that I knew that God was speaking to me. I knew that I had to go home and tell Lauren her story. So I went home and we went into her room and shut the door. And I told her the same story. I told her, I don't know why, but I know that God wants me to tell you this. And we never meant for it to be a secret. How ironic is that? You know, the baby that I rejected, I was worried about her rejecting me. I told her, I don't see myself ever telling this story, but you have my permission to tell it, because I just don't feel like I can. It's like all of those feelings that are inside that box on the shelf, you know, it exploded. Looking back on it now, there was a lot of trauma involved. I can't imagine the trauma that would be there if you had actually had an abortion. I'm only beginning to deal with my own guilt and shame that I didn't even know I had. But when I pulled the box off the shelf and opened it, it exposed all of that crud inside. It's taken 40 years for me to realize that stuffing it all away, it has totally impacted my life. That baby that, you know, I fought to get rid of and then fought to keep, I love her so much. And I can't imagine life without her. I see her kids and think if I had gotten what I wanted, then they wouldn't be here. Lauren's the one that made me a mom.